Come
Good
Happy
afternoon. Happy Anthony, you look fired up, ready to face 2025. This is going to be your year, I feel like, Anthony.
I actually just woke up from a nap, so that's probably why.
that's the vibe I'm getting right now. Anthony, when Mr. Honda faced repeated engine failures and a ruthless wartime economy, he refused to quit. He tested scraps, retooled manufacturing lines, and eventually birthed one of the world's largest automotive empires. Proof that grit matters far more than good ideas. Thank God, because we've never had a good idea in our life. I'm Chris Franks. This is Anthony Franco. Welcome to How to Founder. Today, Anthony, you have brought us an incredibly handsome man as a guest with a haircut that I think is admirable, for sure.
Mr. John looks like if you combine me and Chris, you squish our faces together, you get John Cousins.
Yeah, you can just be like, oh. Is that John, welcome. We apologize in advance for our sophomoric humor, but you built MBA ASAP, decode businesses on your time. You're all about talent development, real world growth, and teaching the secrets to toppling traditional MBAs without the cringeworthy bill. I love it. John, start us off here as founders, as entrepreneurs. Ideas are easy, execution is hard. Just explain that concept.
Well, Anthony and Chris, pleasure to be here. You guys are great. Yeah, well, it always seems like the tough part. Everybody has ideas. Everybody has a ton of ideas, and so then people end up saying, "Well, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's all about execution," and it turns out to be true. I mean, in entrepreneurship, obviously, you got to start with an idea. Everything is a product of mind before it becomes anything else. But a lot of times, for most people, that's just good enough, and they go back and sit on the couch and watch, Sunday football games and have a six-pack or whatever, and just sort of they're comfortable not taking it to the next step of testing their ideas in the real world. And maybe because they don't know how, sometimes it's fear of failure or fear of confronting the world. Like von Clausewitz, the old Prussian general, said, no war plan survives the first contact with the enemy. And that's the kind of thing, when you put your ideas into the real world, they're your babies, right? And suddenly, people might, be ambivalent about them or ignore them, which is probably worse than if they hate them, but, if there's no reaction at all. So a lot of people, I think, entrepreneurs or prospective entrepreneurs shy away from actually trying their ideas in the real world. So that's why the emphasis on execution is really important. If you're working hard, you got to work hard. And if you're working hard, then obviously, and doing execution, then obviously ideas matter, because if you have your ladder against the wrong wall, right? If you have a mediocre idea and you're executing like crazy, it's not really going to go that far. You have to also, it has to be both, right? You have to have good ideas. And sometimes a poor idea or a mediocre idea can be refined through execution and iterating right off of that idea and polishing it up, figuring out what people like, what they don't like, taking feedback from customers or potential customers and putting that into your idea and polishing that idea and making it, from a rough cut to a gemstone or something.
I want to admit something to you guys, because as I quit my really well-paying, cushy-ass middle management job to start my first company, I told friends that I thought you needed to have two things to start a company, to be a successful entrepreneur. Number one was a great idea. Number 2 was courage. What would you have said to me, Anthony, if we were friends and I came to you at that moment and said those two, you have to have those 2 things? Would you have just smacked me or laughed, or what would you have said?
I'm trying to think of an example where that combination turned out tragic, and that combination turns out tragic for a lot of folks.
Well, it certainly did at my first company and
a
second
great
company.
idea and courage. That is scary. That's very scary to think about. Those are the only 2 things you need as an entrepreneur. You need. I think, John, you brought up something really interesting, and that is, everybody has a great idea, and whenever I tell somebody I'm an entrepreneur, when people ask you, what do? I say I'm an entrepreneur, which it usually get like the head tilt. Like, I don't know what that means. That means you sit on your ass? Does that mean you're constantly busy? What does that mean? But I always get like, oh, I got this great idea for this, and then they fill in the blank, right? And they're like, they look at me like approval. They're looking for like validation, and the reality is, I've heard so many bad ideas that have turned out like really good companies because the execution was well done, because they started. So the idea almost is inconsequential to actually taking the first step. It really is.
Yeah, as a place to start. I mean, it's really, change is, start small. It's not about, making a big giant change, but it's more about direction, directionality and having some sort of execution and taking small steps, especially as an entrepreneur. I would challenge you, Chris, on the courage thing. Like, if you're going to jump, never test the depth of a river with both feet, right? If you're just going to jump in, you don't know what you're getting into. Do it.
I did, and I got washed down river, John. It wasn't pretty.
Oh, me too.
I take it a different tack. So courage, like, I think courage is the wrong thing, because if you knew what you were getting into, you'd never jump. So it's delusion. You need delusion in order to start this. You can't know what the obstacles are, otherwise you'd never start.
Absolutely. Everybody, so many entrepreneurs or people say, if I knew what it was going to take to do this at the beginning, I would have never done it. You have to be disillusioned. You have to have such belief in yourself and confidence in yourself and your idea, that you're going to, conquer the world, and your plan for world domination is going to be executed on this straight line. Otherwise, who would start? You're right. And it turns out that the obstacles are the way. I mean, basically, that's where you really learn, and that's where you either iterate or pivot or persevere and keep banging your head on that thing until you get over it. But those are the kind of moments, those crux moments, where you actually learn something about what you're doing. And you have to be, it's better to be prepared for those kind of things, so that it's going to happen, but you don't know when or where, what it's going to be. And when it comes up, oh, right, this is the thing that looks like failure this week, or something like that. Learning from that and figuring out a way to go forward, and not doing too much, because you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on an idea right off the bat that, turns out to not be good. If you did it incrementally, you could sort of,
Where were you 16 years ago, John? Where were you in my life when I was making every one of those mistakes?
We all do. I think
I want to pose this to you, and I want to get your reaction, John, and then I want to kick it to you, Anthony, which is, a smart person once told me that if you're the only person with this idea, it's probably a terrible idea. Every idea, like, if you're the only person, at the same time, we have this story, which is, Airbnb was entirely unique. There was couch surfing. There are these moments where people come up with very unique and radical ideas and are able to execute on those. To what degree am I better off as a founder to really orient myself towards ideas that are really tested and true, or am I better off going and finding that really unique approach?
That's John, a darn good question. I don't know if Anthony, but yeah,
No, go for
it's,
it, John. Go for it, John.
like you said, Airbnb, some of these ideas, wouldn't it be great if whatever, we could just have wings on our ears and fly around and stuff. They're not going to be executable, right? They're going to be very difficult to do. It would be cool. But, when you get to like Airbnb, it had to rely on technology and platforms to be in place. You had to have a matching platform where you could match these, people had excess space in their house with people that needed a room for the night or something like that. Any of these kind of matching platform businesses weren't able to become real until there was, the internet and software and cell phone, smartphones and things where you could get like an Uber where you're matching people that'll drive, capacity with need, or Match.com or Airbnb or, all these kind of tools. So sometimes you have to wait until the technology is there. Then the idea might be feasible on top of that platform. But before that, it really, like Netflix, even, they started out mailing you the discs and stuff, and they were one company, and all of a sudden they realized, oh, wow, the technology is here where we can start streaming this stuff. And if we make our own content, then we don't have to license it and we can really make money. And so sometimes the ideas evolve with the technology that's available at the time.
So what I'm just going to restate, and then I want your take on the same thing, Anthony, which is in this particular case, ideas maybe are not entirely unique. It's the forces that are coming along with those ideas. So in the case of couchsurfing.com, completely existed before Airbnb, but the sharing economy had kicked off, the internet. We were now starting to look more online to find places to stay. So those forces also helped move that idea along. Anthony, same question to you. What am I better off as a founder to look at an idea that has been well trod, well tested, or that entirely unique unicorn idea that may just go crazy?
The difficult part here is how to separate. So you can't separate the idea from how you're going to do it, right? So execution is how. And to get back to Airbnb, there wasn't a new idea. The way they did it was new. So I think where people get stuck in starting to become an entrepreneur is they can't envision in their head how they're going to bring that idea to life. And that's really the hard part. It's the how. Of course, Chris, I've got a Jerry Seinfeld thing that's popping into my head. I'm gonna skip it for this episode because you can't
just tease a Jerry Seinfeld quote and then just say you're going to skip it.
It's the one where he's getting a rental car and he gets up and he's like, I made a reservation, and she's like, we don't have that car available, and he's like, I don't think you understand what a reservation is. And she's like, I understand what a reservation is like. I don't think you do. Anybody can take a reservation. It's the holding that matters. And that's kind of like, that's what it is. It's everybody has an idea. It's the how do you get it across the finish line that makes that idea a business. So Airbnb, they figured out how to go to market. And essentially what they did is they screen scraped Craigslist. They growth hacked. How are they going to get the listings to their dual-sided marketplace? And so they came at it with an innovative how. So all ideas have been done, but the way you bring the idea to market, the way you bring that idea to fruition is where the real innovation happens. It's the how that is exciting for entrepreneurs, not the idea itself.
I want to do one more question around the idea phase. And I think it's something that does apply to a lot of founders, certainly applied to me early on, which is when I opened up the door, when I realized, for lack of a better word, how cheap ideas were, part of my problem was staying disciplined and sticking to an entire idea and proving or disproving that thesis. John, talk about that. How do I know if my idea is good enough to really continue to go execute on versus coming up with another idea?
Well, these are all great, questions and answers. I just finished writing a book, just published it today. It's my 60th.
Congratulations. Look at that, man. That's
It's
amazing.
the third book. I'm cranking them out like a madman. But it's called Focus, and how to, if you're going to be in a startup, how do you maintain focus? And like Steve Jobs said, it's saying no to 1,000 other great ideas and focusing on the one you're going to do. And that, you're absolutely right, Chris. You have to stay with one idea long enough to see whether or not it's good. And so, and there's that whole quick way, Steve Blank kind of, entrepreneurship thing where you create a minimal viable product, a simple product that then you can go show in the real world, not to your friends or, gee, mom, I'm glad you like the product, to people that have no a dog in the hunt, and see if they like it or not. And then you get into customer discovery and customer validation, and you start iterating on that and see how your idea goes. And if the idea is good on that minimal viable, but just minimally put together, whatever, then you can start to build it up and put more resources into it as you understand, this is an idea that people like, or they like this one little part of it, this feature that I didn't think was the main feature. They don't care about the other stuff. Now I have to double down and refocus on this feature. And you start to move through that process of iterating on an idea. A lot of, too, I think ideas are, important. And a lot of it comes, I think, from being sort of a generalist too, where you can look and say, well, sort of like a Reese's cup, chocolate and peanut butter, they match good, where you can take things from other areas and put them together in a new configuration. It's not a new idea, but it's a unique configuration of pre-existing ideas that may be the idea that then you can go and execute on. Another thing I was thinking about execution is there's two kinds, of people in a way, in tech, entrepreneurship, whatever. There's engineers, right, that know how to execute they know the latest, software and technical things, computers are all coming out. And then there's the other part that that's where I came from. And I thought that was the key. If you know how to build things, you can make them and go. Marketing people and people that understand how to reach audiences and create brands and create messaging and all that. That is incredibly challenging and hard too. And it's a big part of execution. That old, adage from that baseball movie, build it and they will come kind of thing, and the guys come out of the cornfields, the old baseball players and stuff. I found it doesn't work that way. I've built things that I think are really, really great, launched them, and crickets, get no response at all. And how do you generate awareness? How do you generate enthusiasm around a new product, an idea? That's also a challenge. So I think there's those two things you need if you're going to execute. You need some sort of technical background, technical kind of chops, whatever it's going to be, and product development, distribution, all those kind of things. And you need marketing chops. You need those kind of skills. That's why there's a lot of pairs of people, because not everybody will have both of those kind of skill sets. And if you get two together, then you can actually have a good maybe co-founding team or something.
Thank you for saying that, John. I'll send you your $20 bribe later for saying that you need. Anthony, same question to you around that kind of idea excitement phase. How do you know when you've settled on an idea versus a shiny new thing that comes in your peripheral vision? You go, maybe that's a better idea. How do you go through that when you're really starting to grind on a company?
I think so I have 1,000 ideas that I've built brands for that I've only launched 10 of them. Right. So I've got so many logos that have been created and names and domains. It's embarrassing. It's like Monica's closet from Friends. It's like you don't want anybody to look in there because you're not as organized as you appear. I
at least appreciate you didn't get the t-shirts, because that would have been the other step. It's just getting the t-shirt for every one of those t-shirts. Yeah.
Right. But once you decide, so I think that early stage playfulness and exploration and creativity is really powerful, because when you're not really risking anything but your time, you can play in that area as much as you want. But you do have to kick one out and actually bring it to market. Otherwise, you're part of the people, the 10% that are purely dreamers and never launch anything, right? So you don't want to be that. You want to be part of the folks that take that step and are willing to fail. And so once you bring it to market, now the question is, how do you know when to pivot? And we've talked about this at length, Chris. It's like the pivot conversation, you have to get to revenue. And if you can't get to revenue, it's time to change, right? If you can't get somebody to open up their wallet, something's wrong. It's time to change the idea. And then the next hurdle is, can you acquire a customer for less than it costs you, or can you make the product and acquire the customer for less than what you can get them to pay for it?
You
So
just
in other
broke
words, can you
about
make it profitable?
70% of VC companies right there, though, Anthony. So, right, yeah,
Well,
that's a
eventually,
wild
right?
idea.
Like eventually, you want to eventually get the profit, and then it's, can you scale it? And so all of those are like hurdles that you need to overcome as you're growing a company. And you know, it's perfect. It's perfectly fine to have a side hustle that makes you a couple $100 a month. I don't know if that's entrepreneurship, but it's the beginning phases of it. But if you got somebody to open up their wallet and pay you for something, you validated the idea. Period. I can go down all kinds of different rabbit holes on that.
I want to
I'll
kick
stop
this
there,
back.
Chris.
I want to kick this back to you, John, because I think we've got this to this point. So we know that ideas are cheap. Execution is critically important. We know that we need to look for the best ideas. We need to look for the forces that are coming together to create the convergence of forces to create these great ideas. But at the end of the day, we know that ideas are less important than execution. So as an early stage founder, John, I've got this idea. And I'm hearing this advice from one really good looking bald guy and some other dude, that it's really important to go out and execute on this idea. How do I go do that? What are the logical steps that I can start to take? And very early stage, idea stage founder, what are the things that I can do just right off the bat? You mentioned marketing. Let's say that I'm a marketing person. I don't have somebody that can build it yet. What are some practical things that you'd suggest for an early stage founder that would want to go do that?
Well, Anthony, those different things that you said were, those different stages. I mean, that's right on. And what you said at the beginning, playfulness, I think that's the attitude, the entrepreneurial mindset or something to start with, so you don't burn yourself out, is to not think of this as work or struggle or with some sort of end game in mind. I want to be a millionaire so that I can quit doing this and just sit on the beach. It has to be something that you love to do, and it has to be playful, and you have to throw out different ideas and be creative. Now, you're right. How do you start something from nothing? That whole 0 to 1, that's the critical thing. How do you get from an idea into something that's concrete and tangible that then you can start to iterate with and play with? And I would say if some sort of minimal viable product or concretized idea that then you can sort of share on the internet. It could be sort of vaporware kind of stuff, just an idea, a logo, maybe just a little bit of a model of things, even if you don't have it actually built, or a description. And the place I think a good place to start is building an audience. Even if you just, you don't have an idea right now, but you have a lot of ideas, and you can write them down and start to blog or to, do social media, something where you're building an audience that then you can test your ideas against. It's that old marketing thing, Madison Avenue, let's run it up the flagpole and see who salutes. You have to have something and then see what the response is going to be from the world. So you don't want to put money, I don't think, into paid advertising right away. You want some earned, audience that you've generated. The best way is to have some sort of go through that process of having making a lead magnet, some sort. And this is very simple. What you can start with is having your idea in a PDF form, with a cover you've made on Canva or something, the logo and everything, and then just putting that out on your social media to your contacts, and then asking them to trade their email address for that, and then sending them emails and cultivating them, and then start to get an audience together that then you can turn into a funnel at some point towards your idea. But then at least you have some people that are liking who you are, what your ideas are, and then you can start to, when you come up with the one that you want to make a company on, you have a basis that you can start from to test whether or not they like your idea. Because ultimately what you're looking for, you got to have somebody open their wallet or say they will. It's that product market fit, right? You got to have your product or your service with a market that's willing to engage with you with money. And once you get
it's a really important conversation, Anthony, because this is the piece. We came up at a time when the lean startup was really the almost the words that we used, right? We spoke in lean startup, but what lean startup suggested, it was so early in the days of the internet that if you build a great product, that there's going to be an audience there, that you will find an audience. And that I think is untrue anymore, Anthony. What I think John is saying, which is I think something that we've talked about, but I think he said it eloquently. Your first step in execution is to go see if anybody, I almost cussed Anthony, I didn't, cares about your idea, right? Gives a crap about your idea. Is that a fair way to say that, John? Did I rephrase that in an okay way?
Yes, you did. Right.
Okay.
But you're exactly
so, Anthony.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think?
There's also an added benefit to that. So I find if there's something that I don't want to do, but I know I have to do it, I tell somebody I'm going to do it. And
accountability.
It's like you almost put it out in the air, and now somebody is expecting you to do it. The same is true when you're talking to, even when John says audience, it could be 5 people, right? It could be 5 people you run this about across, and you say, I am going to do this, but I need your feedback. Now, not only are you getting feedback, now you're also kind of putting your name on something and saying, that's the first step of executing, is telling somebody that you're going to execute. It has this pull effect to get you to do the next step. It's like, all right, now I've told people I'm going to do this. What's the next best thing that I could be doing in order to get this to a reality? So I think it's twofold. It's telling people and seeing if you get positive response. Ideally, email address is great. Better thing is money. And then setting the expectations you're going to execute on it. So now you have to, because you put your name on it.
This is it's a really fascinating point, John, because I want to play the counter argument for a second, which is, in my first company that I did all those mistakes, I thought I had to do that. I went out and did this thing, and I had told so many people that I didn't quit when I should have quit. So I had the personal sunk cost fallacy playing. And so I put so much of my ego in the success of this thing. So talk a little bit about the counter. Like, there's a flip side to that coin too, which is, at some point in time, if it ain't working, you got to move on to the next one, right?
Absolutely. What you were saying about, the pivot conversation, do you persevere or pivot? And they always say grit, right? Grit's the thing, Angela Duckworth, you got to keep going, but at some point, banging your head against the wall, if it's not working, you have to step back and say, wait, I got to pivot here. I got to do something different, or maybe it's completely changed the idea. And that is an art. That's something that, there's no, algorithm or rule-based thing that says, if this and happens, then you persevere. If that happens, then it's time to pivot. You got to sort of gut feel that and see what you're going to do. Nowadays, what Anthony was saying about having all these domain names and logos and things, those are great ways, I think, to start. You can get a domain name and set up a website for very, very little money, and make, with a graphics program like Canva or something, make logos and things like that. Don't hire people to do it. Do it yourself. In fact, do everything yourself. DIY the heck out of these ideas, because I found whenever I have somebody else, a partner, or hire somebody to do a part of it, my interest in that part of the business atrophies, and suddenly I don't have control over it. I'm a control freak now. I like to do every part of it. I'm a solopreneur, and because I find it all interesting, but I want to also keep control over that. So you can make a website, put your idea up there, make a logo, make a business name that you've just come out of your head. They're all ideas, and it's a confluence of all those ideas. Start designing a little website and learn how to do that. It's so simple, that everybody should have, a handful of websites that they're just playing with, and a handful of logos and a handful of company ideas that they're seeing which one maybe is the one that's going to work for them, and just see if anybody is interested in these things, and put it on your social media accounts. Have strong social media accounts. That's free. You can have a Facebook account, an X account, and a LinkedIn account, and you can get an email, program. Like a lot of them have a free version up to 1,000 people or something, so there's no excuse not to be doing all of those kind of things if you think you have an idea. And even if your idea, you're not really know if it's going to work, start practicing execution. It's like, well, I know this kind of thing. Well, let me make a logo, let me make a website, and let me start to brand around something and see how I start to get those skills together. So when you do have a good idea, you're ready to run with it.
I want to get to the speed round, but Anthony, first, just give you a chance to react to that. The personal sunk cost fallacy. If I just keep going down this path, how do I know it was time to quit? And also, I think that there's another big underlying factor in there, is that people actually don't care. And you're like, you think to yourself like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go tell all these people that I've told them that I was going to do this one thing. And then I'm going to tell them I'm going to go do something else. And they're like, oh yeah, I totally forgot what you were going to do in the first place. I think we tend to have this sort of egocentric belief that we, people are waiting to hear
married,
what we're
right, Chris?
I don't think about it as much as
I don't think if that's true if it's your wife.
Yeah, that's straight. Yeah, beyond all expectations. Yes, I've managed to make the marriage work. I think, which is crazy.
I would say one thing. I think it like pivot, persevere. Those artful parts of it, that we have to trust our intuition and our judgment. It's also ego and not letting ego get in the way. As an entrepreneur, you have to have a major ego to say, I can do this. This idea is good. I can make this happen. But also you have to not have your ego tied up where it's like, well, the sunk cost. I told people I was going to do this, but I better stay with this because what people think I failed, or something.
I think you just hit on probably one of the things that we talk about, but it's so hard to do, which is, famously the late great Colin Powell said, avoid having your position so close to your ego that when your position fails, your ego goes with it. But in entrepreneurship, we tend to put our ego so closely, particularly early stage founders, put it so closely to the outcome of your project that it starts to, when that starts to fail, it starts to feel really bad. Anthony, react to that, and let's speed round.
No, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think that was perfectly stated. Let's go ahead and jump into the speed round.
All right, jump. Are you ready for the speed round?
The answer is twice when I was 18.
I like it. All right. So when it comes to ideas, do you work to come with the perfect ideas or just go through ideas really fast?
Go through ideas really fast. And, I like the thing of, instead of ready, aim, fire, ready, fire, aim, put something out there and then get the feedback and then iterate and just keep, going on things, and do tons of ideas, throw a bunch of mud on the wall and see what sticks.
Should I go for a very niche market and try to expand, or should I start with a really big market?
Niche down, baby.
Yeah. I fail fast or persevere and avoid failure and try to gut that through.
Fail fast and fail forward. And don't think of it as failure as a bad thing, but it's a way to learn. Like Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail. I just learned 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Action now, go do something, or should I create a really solid plan that I want to go execute across?
Do. Always have a bias towards action. That is the key.
It's like what Yoda says, do or do not. And then should I try to get a whole group of people together, get a team focus, or should I really just focus on the solo early on?
Solo or team? Is that what the
Yep.
question?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, over time, honestly, I started out as an engineer working at big companies and stuff. And then I started doing entrepreneurship. I wanted to be my own boss. And then over time, I've grown tired of partners, big customers, investors, employees, all those kind of things. And so now I am a solo entrepreneur, a solopreneur. And that's only been because the technology is there that I can leverage in all these different ways to automate things. It's just me and the robots, and I like it that way.
Anthony fired me months ago. I just keep showing up. It's just strange.
That's not even Chris. That's a digital reproduction of Chris.
Yeah, I'm just an AI version.
And you notice I didn't make him any better looking than the real one.
Anthony, really great conversation. John, what did you learn? What's our takeaways from the episode?
So the things that I took away, Chris, I like what John said. Ready, fire, aim. That's really that should be the title of this episode. Ready, fire, aim. One thing that we kind of danced around but didn't really jump into deeply was the notes. The reason why people don't get started, I think, is or where they fail quickly is when they're doing the things that makes them feel. They're doing things to add dopamine to their brain and not doing the hard things. Like they're avoiding the hard stuff and only doing the stuff that makes them feel good. Don't do that. The other bumper sticker that I have is, ask and tell people what you are doing, both to get feedback and also to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, I'm going this direction. The idea, obviously it's trivial. How you execute the product and go to market makes the business, not the idea. And the 4 pivot points, I think these are good goals to have. So one is the first thing you're trying to get is somebody to give you their email address, then they open their wallet, then get profitable revenue, and then get to scale. And you don't need to plan all those out. It's the next thing that you're doing and just look at it at that point. And if you can't get past the email address part, you have to continue to figure out what the messaging is before you get to their email address. Then you have to figure out what the messaging is to open their wallet, et cetera, et cetera. To Chris, where can we deep dive on this subject?
Some really good stuff. I've already talked about the lean startup. We just talked about how the lean startup has changed. It's still worth every penny. Every founder needs to read the lean startup. Eric Ries, and all the work that kind of led up into that work, like 3 Steps to the Epiphany by John. You just mentioned his name. Steve Blank. Thank you.
Steve Blank, Osterwalder with the business model canvas.
Yeah, absolutely. Execution, the discipline of getting things done by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan, I believe. Good to Great, obviously, Jim Collins. Even though it's not in the domain necessarily, it's such a great book that talks about what are the tactics that get you there. And a great article from Harvard Business Review, Cracking the Code on Execution. And there's a good podcast from Startup Therapy hosted by Will Schroeder and Ryan Rutan. John, great conversation.
Thanks,
Loved
guys.
it. Where can we find more information about you? You have like 750 books is what I hear. Are all those books behind you? They're all your books?
I got 63 books. I just published my 63rd. And I have one called Dreamers to Doers, which is basically this kind of idea. This new one is called Focus, how to get your focus in line. But so I have all those books on Amazon. You can just look up John Cousins. My company is MBA ASAP, basically business school knowledge as soon as possible kind of thing. My website is mba-asap.com. And I'm on all the social media, things. You can find me on any of the social media and stuff like that. So I always answer all my emails, and my email is johnjohn@mba-asap.com.
I love it. John, thank you so much for joining us. Anthony, what do we got?
So next time, which is tomorrow morning, actually, we're going to talk about mindfulness for leaders. So how do you become more mindful as a leader?
Thank you, Anthony. Finally getting all hippie on us. I love it, man. This is my wheelhouse.
Yeah, it's the professionalism that I respect. So reminder, first of all, thank you everybody for listening in. We really appreciate, our audience is growing. That means that that you like our guests more than you like Chris and I, which is amazing. For those of you that just happen to tune in, you can follow us anywhere podcasts are found. Just go to howtofounder.com and follow us on Apple, Spotify, or everything. And to sign out, I wish you all that your venture grows faster than Chris's hair. With that, thank you guys. We'll talk to you soon.